In over 20 years, that's 7 different companies in biopharma. There isn't one meeting that I was a part of that didn't include a focus on the patient. To be a part of the life sciences industry, you honor the patient. You want them to be empowered. You want them to be engaged. You want them to feel like there's control and hope in every course of their treatment. So talking about the patient today is really an appropriate thing for us to do as we think about clinical and commercial innovations in this space. I'm really excited to get together a panel for you today. We're going to talk more about the patient, empathy, and beyond. And I'm going to start with Playo's very own Abby Reynolds. Abby, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. So for the folks that don't know you yet, let's do some introductions. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I guess I started way back when in pharmacy school, graduated from West Virginia University, and from there completed a community practice residency with the University of North Carolina School of Pharmacy. And I was lucky enough to work for Car Drug, which was a regional pharmacy chain in the area at that time, and manage their clinical pharmacy programs, one of which happened to be the Good Start program in Playo. So I guess it's been about 9 years ago now. I like to say I jumped the fence, came to the other side. So I now support all of our client services activities for Playo and have done so for the last 9 years. So happy to be here today to talk about how our insights on how we impact patients and what we think about the human touch.
I think that sounds exciting, especially you having those experiences really kind of on both sides of the equation. I think is very, very, very powerful and something that frankly we need more of. I think it makes a real difference. That's for sure. All right. Well, let's continue to build out our panel. Let's bring up Matthew Crandall. Matthew from Playo, how are you? It's good to see you today.
I'm great. Good to see you. Good to see you. It's rainy on the East Coast. Hopefully some other people have some sunshine, but great to see you all today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So Matthew, I know about your background, but let's make sure everyone else does as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your work history?
Yes, I'll even tell you one part you don't know. Before pharma, I actually started out in the spirits industry, working on Bailey's Irish Cream and other spirits, which was a great place for a young person to start in marketing. But for me, it wasn't a place to stay for life. So I went on to the brand side, and I did it a little backwards than a lot of my peers. I worked at pharma directly at Pfizer and BMS, at Carter Products, and then went to the agency side and really focused on the communications, specifically what's going to motivate doctors, what's going to help them have better conversations with their patients, and also working on DTC campaigns. And I loved it, and I wanted even more fast moving. So I've been in sales or services side for the last 15 or more years, spending a lot of that time in diabetes, a real do-it-yourself condition, and moved from acquisition to adherence and patient engagement just this year, joining Abby over at Playo.
Well, it's exciting to have you here, and some of those experiences definitely overlap with mine, and in fact, our final panelist, a over 20-year pharmaceutical commercial leader, and Eric and I, when we were at Amylin, indirectly worked with you, Matthew, at one of your previous ventures. But let's welcome Eric Gubera to the panel.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it was really such a great opportunity to be introduced to Playo's value proposition, specifically when I was at Digital Pharma East. So I'm pleased we were able to gather together and really discuss, if you think about it, the foundation of the life science value proposition, which comes down to impacting the patients. And not just impacting the patients over the short term, but the long haul. So I'm just pleased to be here and just share my insights and experience with this great panel.
Well, we're going to definitely draw into everyone's experiences here today. So kind of like, let me go ahead and set the stage here. When I go back in time and I think about my first role in marketing, it was to develop a patient initiative. Things have changed quite a bit along the way. And now we've got a lot of very unique organizations that are helping us kind of get closer to the patient. and ultimately help them not only just access, but really stay on these therapies. I mean, one of the best patients, I can tell you almost every MD, KOL has said this, one of the best patients is a compliant patient. That's for sure. But it takes a lot with people's complex lives who may be dealing with complex conditions to feel engaged and empowered enough with their therapies to go ahead and make sure that they stay on brand. We got to give them a reason to believe. So when we do think about these things, because I got to tell you, I'm dating myself, but I got into that role originally back in 2007. The players, the opportunities, everything is a little bit different. So Abby, I'm going to turn to you. Maybe help us understand a little bit about what Playo is all about, but then I want to talk about the stakeholders and what's changed in the patient engagement game.
Absolutely. So, adherence has been a major, massive problem for, I think as long as all of us can remember. There is no silver bullet. Patients are incredibly complex. You can line up two people that appear the same in a lot of ways, and how they are or are not adherent will be dramatically different. And Playo recognized that early on. And, pharmacy, as a pharmacist myself, I see all of the opportunities that a pharmacy team has to connect with the patient. And one of the, I guess you could say, voids is, you get a new prescription. You probably have Googled things about it. You ask your doctor a few questions. You come to the pharmacy. The pharmacist is going to provide some level of basic education, maybe teach you if it's something you have to use. A device might teach you how to use it, you name it. But the crux of the matter is, you get home and you're in the comfort of your own home. You have all of this new information and you have to put your plan in action. And we found that is a key area where patients could use additional support. We at Playo like to focus on the emotional barriers to adherence. We find that adherence oftentimes mimics the technology hype cycle, if I could speak. And as a result of that, patients, like I mentioned, they have this peak where they have collected all of their information, their second opinions, you name it. And then they get home and they fall into what we like to refer to as that trough of disillusionment. And that's where the patient, as I mentioned, has to put their plan in action. They have to overcome their fear of injection, how am I going to work this into my routine? What if I don't want to do it? I don't feel bad. I don't feel any different when I take the medication. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And it's in that trough where Playo decided, that's where we need to step in. That's where we can make a huge impact on patients in general. And so, we help them find that slope of enlightenment by motivating, empowering patients to establish a routine with their medication. And what that in turn does is it allows, our pharmacy partners to focus on the things that have become ever more critical, especially now in the midst of the pandemic, with respect to medication therapy management, vaccinations, you name it. It allows them to act as the providers that they are, and allows us to support patients on the back end to provide a baseline foundation of adherence.
That's really powerful. So Abby, let's continue talking about maybe how we got to where we are today, and looking back at that history. So when it comes to patient adherence, engagement, empathy, et cetera, a lot of that was done by the doctor in the old days, but times have changed. So tell us about, exactly what has changed if some of our audience isn't necessarily in a patient function at their biopharma or med tech company, and who are the principals and players in the game right now that are helping to steer and support patients who need that help to stay on med?
Sure, that's a great question. In a lot of ways, nothing has changed. Adherence is still a problem. I at some point would like to get to a point where we all focus on adherence, or adherence is more kind of an outcome, of the care that the patient has received along the way. So, in that sense, in a lot of ways, nothing has changed with respect that we still get a prescription, we pick it up at the pharmacy, and then, we do our best to take the medication. But in other ways, a lot has changed. Pharmacies have evolved. We have different delivery options, different discount options, copay programs have evolved, savings programs have evolved. You add in the new digital tools and apps that are available to patients. Even things that track your usage. How much insulin have I used? How much of this inhaler am I using? Am I using it properly? But again, all of these tools only help the people who are already engaged or who want to be engaged, the willing and able, I guess, if it may. You know, I think again, this goes back to that there needs to be much more of a focus on the mental part of it, the emotional barriers, the, you know, the mechanical barriers are important, but we need to look at it holistically. And I think that that's a lot of the direction that we've gone. You know, you mentioned that doctors used to do a lot more of this, or pharmacies used to do a lot more of this. I think that what's happened is, as so much has changed with time, everyone has taken a more active role in adherence. And that's exactly the direction that I think we need to go in. It's not a one and done solution where if a pharmacist does this, you know, then this is the outcome. If a doctor or prescriber does this, then this is the outcome. We have to all take ownership in this in order to move the ball forward.
I agree. It's hard to believe it's 2021 and we have all of these brands, all of these tools, all of these online resources, all of these apps, brochures at the pharmacy, at the doctor's offices. I watch TV occasionally. There are so many different companies that are trying to help provide coupons or discounts for drugs. And like, why are we still talking about adherence problems in 2021? Matthew, Abby, want to weigh in?
Yeah. Well, I'll say there's a lot of good things working in our favor. Like we were talking about the earlier days of pharma, and pharma, you know, is a little bit slow to change, but it used to be only marketing to the doctor, and that was priority 1, 2, and 3. I mean, DTC has only been around 20 years, and brands are still struggling with how to build relationships with the patient. But things are working. We have a lot of tailwinds because of the rise of consumerism, not just in pharma, but in every industry, with better control over your experience, with digital tools that help you manage and get information. But as Abby said, but that only works if you can manage it yourself, if you're not maybe fatigued or challenged or depressed or denying that you have this condition. So every tool is there, every drug is there. If we take them properly, we can cover almost any disease state. But you've got to be an active participant. And all these tools you talk about, Frank, it's a bit drinking from the fire hose. When you get your script, you might get 7 touch points to help you. It could be the pharmacy, a CRM program, a copay card, your referral to another physician. So a lot of it is just feeling overwhelmed. As patients, we've probably all been there at one point. You get it, and then you're looking up information, and you're getting texts, and you're getting emails, and you don't remember what you signed up for, maybe. It's a bit overwhelming, and I think that's part of the problem. The tools are there, but now how do we focus?
That's very fair. Eric, I'd like to include you on this when it comes to that focus. You've been leading sales teams and sending them out to help HCPs of all sorts for a lot of years. Going back to here we are in 2021 with all the initiatives, the programs, the support materials, the starter kits, you name it, that we give those providers in the office. Help us understand, why do we still have this problem, and from the pharma point of view?
Well, there's something that's missing, because I can share with the audience that there's been no shortage of investment in the whole new patient start, and that's regardless of the disease state, and even really challenging injectable therapies. We've developed patient starter kits. I was part of free trial offer pilot programs, which became well validated as a means to get patients off to a start where they could actually try it before they buy it, if you will, with the clinicians. And yet, in spite of all of this, and then sometimes in spite of fantastic product launches that exceeded expectations, we would find out 3 months later, and especially in medicines and therapies like diabetes, where getting the patient to that hemoglobin A1C, where the proof is in the pudding, like, is it working? Are they there? And then we would find out, to our shock, that we had lost almost a third to sometimes 50% of our new patient starts. And I can tell you that's gut-wrenching and disappointing on so many levels. It's disappointing, obviously, for the business, right? But it's also disappointing for the patient, And that sort of disconnect in the value proposition and losing that in spite of all of our efforts in terms of mechanistic, solving for all the mechanistic challenges, right, of new patient starts. So I think the industry is like, I think we have invested heavily in that area. But I'm convinced, and one of the reasons why I'm here today to learn from Pleo is like, what is that element that's missing? That we need to, for lack of a better way to put it, just be better. Like, we need to be better at this. So I feel like something's missing in that equation that we really need to focus on moving forward.
Right. The pharma's got some fundamental challenges. Unlike every other industry, you've got a time period, you got a time frame before you go generic. And when you've got three competitors, it's often an arms race to bring in all the patients you can. And these are your lifeblood and your future for the next 8 or 10 years until you go generic. And other industries don't have that. You could build a relationship with patients over time. Here it's a race, and it's sexy. I mean, everybody wants to work on that acquisition campaign, the CRM campaign, the DTC ad. I mean, it's high budget, it's high reward, and that's what all of our brand managers are tracked on is scripts, NRX, TRX, and the easiest way is what's coming in. It's a lot harder to manage that leaky bucket and see who's leaving and why. So we keep the relationship with the customers we have, those KOLs, those prescribers. We talk to them, we run DTC, and we watch the front end. But it's harder to track the back end, and I think it's just a little less sexy. It's very granular, and as Abby said, there are 1,000 different reasons why people leave a franchise.
Well, I think what to use that word sexy would be for companies to think about the experience they're really committed to giving patients that they will serve today and tomorrow. I went to a rare disease Congress meeting a few years ago when we could still go to physical conferences and be face to face. And I heard a patient get up in front of the crowd, and she was saying that with her particular rare disease, she had no awareness, no visible commitment from the drug company that once they got their drug approved, and she was, in her words, a $300,000 a year asset to them. There was no outreach, no connection, no sense of service. But once she got on drug, she heard from them quite a bit. I was sad for her. I thought that was a real miss. I would love to see, and I'm saying this, my own point of view as a pharmaceutical executive, if we thought at the company level, not just the brand level, I think we would just kick things up a gear with our ability to really demonstrate these commitments. But Abby, I'd like to ask you, if it's okay, when you think about the last 5 to 10 years or so, or even playing back your previous experiences, from 9 years ago and before that, what do you see that's changed, or what do you see that's different when it comes to this adherence challenge?
Sure. And just to take it back even a step further, I think one thing that we have always done at Pleo that at least holds true to my heart being a pharmacist is we always put the patient first. And you're talking a lot about pharma and getting the patient, and you gave that example about the specific patient who said she was worth $300,000. And I just think I'm so passionate about what we do because we put the patient first. And so everything that we do is focused on human connection, empathy, empowerment, all focused and centered around the patient. And sure, we have pharma partners, and sure, we work to incorporate a lot of those fantastic things and assets, that we've touched upon that have been built. But really, when you put the patient at the center of everything that you do, I feel like the other pieces start to align. But to answer your question, Frank, about the change in the past 5 to 10 years, I mean, I think that the complexities of us as in human nature and who we are and the challenges that we face have only gotten bigger. I can speak personally as a mother, a working mother who has young kids in school. The complexities that I faced within the last year are far more than any years in the past. And I think that everyone has a part of that within the last couple of years. And, there is the concept of personalization And what does that mean for patients? Recognizing that my journey is different than Frank's journey is different than Matthew's journey. And, understanding that a lot of the solutions that are out there need to focus more on personalization. If you look back 10 years ago, I don't know that emotional barriers were maybe indicated as one of the primary impacts of or targets for adherence. Maybe it was more of a focus on savings or some of the mechanical barriers. You look at things in the pharmacy world that have changed that I touched on earlier, like delivery and access. We've made a lot of great strides in that area, but there are certainly other areas that maybe we haven't made as many strides. And I guess what I'm getting at is, there really is no one size fits all approach. What works for me might not work for the next person, no matter how similar we seem. And so that's something that we try to, at least from a Playo perspective, really take into consideration that my journey is not the same as your journey, even if we're on the same brand with the same prognosis, with the same disease state, you name it. So, I think that while a lot has changed in the last 5 to 10 years, I think we've learned more and we're in a better place to address adherence, but we still have the problem. We haven't fixed it.
Yeah.
Mm.
If I could add, I said before is there's not enough focus, and it's still sexy to focus on acquisition. There are smart adherence tools out there. I mean, pharma is working on it. Frisia did a study earlier this year, $5 billion spent a year on patient support programs. But the percent of patients who are aware and using them is like 3%. So there's still a misalignment there. The tools are out there. Pharma's doing a good job creating content, always have, always will, thinking of the patient. It's always, top of mind with the HCP. But how do you actually literally get it to the patients? And that's part of what we help with. Our Playo model is to really talk to patients, human to human, and just help align resources that address their emotional needs.
Yep.
That's powerful. And also just to put strike a contrast there. So the $5 billion number to the layperson looking at pharma may say, wow, that's a big investment. I just wanted to point out it's a $1.3 trillion industry that talks about being patient-centric. So is there an opportunity to improve where our actions, and results kind of align to those intentions? I'd like to think so. So Abby, you talked about that tailoring, and I love that because we all do. Let's just face it. We all think that we're special. We have unique things that are going on. These are unique times. Perhaps are there any dominant themes around what's causing patients to be non-adherent, non-compliant in these times?
Yeah. I think going back to that technology hype cycle that I was referring to and saying that patients follow a similar path with new prescriptions, I think that there are so many reasons why the emotional barriers just come to the forefront for me. You can give a patient a savings card, you can deliver their medication, you can educate them on how to use it. You can, give them every resource that's available that's out there, that no matter how fantastic they are, if a patient has an emotional barrier, be it stigma of the disease state, maybe they don't want to accept the fact that they now have, any chronic disease state, diabetes, HIV, a mental health, be it depression, anything at all. I think that a lot of times, a patient taking the medication is a level of acceptance. So, that's one of the major emotional barriers, acceptance and stigma. Education is another one. A lot of times, you can find information, but it needs to have a certain level of health literacy. We need to be speaking to patients in a way that they can absorb it. Patients are people, and we have healthcare backgrounds. They don't. Not every patient has a healthcare background. And then certainly tying into the emotional piece, depression. If you are depressed and can't come to terms with some of the depression related issues that you have, you're never going to be as adherent as you could be. And so, one of the things that we have found incredibly important in all that we do is that addressing the emotional barriers. And that can look and feel a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's relaying to others, that their concerns and their fears are similar to others, just like them. They aren't alone. They aren't, Frank, you said we all like to feel special, but there are other people out there like us. and kind of reiterating that and affirming that the patient's questions, concerns, and fears are normal, and helping them, really take charge of that, setting goals for themselves. How am I going to move myself forward? What is my slope of enlightenment that I can find to empower me to adopt, a positive medication routine?
If I could add one thing I learned from Abby and the team when I came on board, setting goals doesn't mean I'm going to conquer my diabetes next week or heart failure is a thing of the past. Really small goals that build up. I'm going to eat something healthy tomorrow. I'm going to walk beyond my mailbox this morning. I mean, these little goals are small commitments that people make. And it's not about berating them for missing a therapy or reminding them as if they're going to forget. It's just helping little behavioral health goals that make a person want to engage in their health more.
I like that. And I want to get deeper into that. Before we do that, I do want to bring in the very practical perspective from the biopharma leadership side through Eric. Eric, life science companies will occasionally have some pretty significant efforts with their field teams to address the adherence issue, but through different tools, conversation, and messaging that their medical affairs teams or their field sales teams, their account teams will deploy. Can you give us a couple examples of what you've seen as a commercial leader as far as when adherence is finally getting to the point where you're going to change field strategy, of what actions you ask your field to take to help address this compliance and adherence issue?
Sure, I'd be happy to address kind of what the traditional approach has been. And as I mentioned earlier, there's been such a hyper focus on generating all the resources and deploying them upon your product launch, in terms of whether it's free trial offers or for offices that accept samples and things like that. That is the initial response. Sadly, when we find that there is an adherence challenge down the road, pharma's approach is traditionally very reactive. And in fact, you'll find what I found has happened consistently is then all of a sudden there's renewed interest in making pharmacy calls and kind of going to the pharmacy and making sure that they have all the resources that are needed when the patient comes in for a refill and things like that. That again, getting back to the monomaniacal focus on mechanical interventions, like making sure the payers and everything, that there's there's some financial incentives to make sure there's as least amount of friction as possible up front. But what I'm learning from this discussion and the real gap is empathy. To what Matthew and Abby were talking about, like these personal touches, and personalizing the approach, beyond the start. It's sort of like it's easy for pharma to be all about it in terms, but once they get the investment from the patient, their money essentially, it's like we can't walk away from them at that time. So I think we, as an industry, we really need to look at some innovative and newer ways to ensure that we are with the patient. There's that old saying, nobody cares how much you know, right? Until they know that you care. And so I'm learning from this that we really need to look at building empathy into our business planning and strategy, and really developing this mindset, this culture, at our companies. And that's a leadership challenge. That's going to be a significant pivot for the life science companies out there. And that's why I'm thrilled to be literally learning right along with our audience from our friends at Pleo.
And I appreciate it's a weird yin yang, because we all want to do things more digital, more efficient, more scalable. And Pleo certainly has our digital platform, but it over focuses on the other side, emotional. We look at EQ instead of just AI. So we're really looking at how to work with that patient. And we don't do it when there's a problem or when there's a gap. Our model's a little different. We reach all the patients when they start therapy, so that problem doesn't happen in 20 or 30 or 60 days. We're not waiting to intervene when there's a problem. And I think that's what's been successful, is because smart as we are, we can't figure out who's going to have that problem with the adherence gap.
Mm-hmm.
And why should we? If we're committed to patients, we need to be in the long game. I'm all into efficiency, but I think this topic is all about the long game, to demonstrate that commitment. And Eric used the term culture. Culture is not transactional. That's longitudinal. What type of atmosphere do you have? Well, this patient commitment, it's longitudinal as well. So Matthew, build on that a little bit. How does empathy play into patient success?
So since I got to play, I've been fortunate to listen to phone calls, and it's really been enlightening. So we have lay people, non-clinicians, who call patients, and just these little things mean so much. About one discussion where this woman says, "Oh, the medication really helped me. My blood sugar is under control," and the caller said, "Well, give yourself a hand too. You stayed with it. You took it every day." And she's like, "Yeah, I guess I did." It helped her think, well, it's not just the pill or the injection, it's something I can do to help myself. Those little touches, I underestimated them. I get jaded as like someone who's been in pharma forever and busy life, and I don't want somebody calling me. But these calls to people in rural counties who are often older and on multiple medications, it means the world that somebody is just asking, "How are you doing? Are you taking your medication? Is it helping?" These little questions that we can have motivate people.
I love it. I love it. So, Abby, tell me, you've worked with a lot of companies over the last 9 years. Um, when it comes to this adherence issue in pharma, like who owns this issue? Like who's responsible for solving for this? Who do you want to see at the table when a brand is thinking about launching an initiative in this area?
Yeah, sheesh, that's a tough one because I think we're all partly responsible. I can't point my finger at any one healthcare professional, pharma, you name it. I think we all have a seat at the table, and we all have to have a seat at the table if we're truly going to address the bigger issue here. Again, there is no silver bullet, unfortunately, or we wouldn't even be having the discussion today, obviously. As far as who I would like to see at the table, I think that it's fantastic that pharma is now looking to Matthew, I think you used the term the leaky bucket, but plug the leaky bucket. They're seeing more and more value in maintaining and keeping patients in addition to acquiring new patients as well. Even my dog, I think in the background, I didn't realize she was there, wants to participate in the discussion today. But as far as who's at the table, I think that we all have a piece of ownership in this, and that goes all the way down to the patient level. Like Matthew mentioned, helping the patient understand that they can make a difference. It isn't just the medication. The medication will only work if you use it. And how do I do that? And how do I be successful? I think that, in order for adherence to improve across the board, and in order for us to improve the non-adherence issues that we see in the United States, we all have to take an active role, and we all have to work collectively to understand that, there is that no one is the same, that we are all human, we are all complex, and we all can benefit from being treated as just that, a human. Understanding, that we all have different barriers and working to collectively overcome them.
That's fascinating. So I think this is one of those issues where I want to get away from the dollars and cents for just a moment, only because as organizations, when we talk about being patient centric in our mission statements and our value pages, it's not like there's no disclosure that says, oh yeah, as long as it's really profitable or convenient or easy for us. No, these big bold messages are like, we're committed to patients in these particular areas. So,
right.
Abby, tell me, getting away from the dollars and cents, what's the upside of a company, of a brand team coming together cross-functionally and saying, we're really committed to making sure that we're supporting programs that allow these patients to feel our empathy, be empowered, and take the medications they need to improve and extend their lives? Like, what are like the more kind of intangibles here that are benefits for a company to launch this initiative, no matter what it takes as far as work hours and effort and cross-functional teams, that no, this commitment's really worth it?
Right, sure. I mean, you can look at that in a couple of different ways. You can look at it in things that are measurable, such as prescription lift and prescription persistence, you name it. And certainly with pharma companies and, receiving prescription records, we are able to measure that and share aggregate level data back with the pharma companies to assure them that their efforts in keeping patients and improving adherence are working. But I think on the other side of that, I like the touchy-feely part of it too. I love hearing and listening to phone calls, from within the program. I love hearing, a patient who maybe has been suffering from major depressive disorder tell me that, or not me, but tell us, our good starters, that they got out and went to the grocery store on their own, and hearing that level of excitement in their voice, and the fact that they're proud of themselves and, that they are taking charge and doing the right thing, but all the way down to the more simple comments and feedback, patient insights we hear and learn on a daily basis. I appreciate this. No one has checked on me like this before. I feel the support. This is soothing. Each and every one of those types of messages, I think, resonates, at least to me, equally as loud as the actual performance metrics within a program. So I think, when I relay information back to a pharma company, if they're unsure or, looking to become engaged in more of a human-centered program that focuses on adherence from the start, those are the types of things that I think are equally as powerful, if not more.
That's fantastic. So Matthew, what's the next frontier for life sciences in this area?
That's a great question. I think it's moving. We talked about personalized medicine for so many years. Now we could tie that to personalized adherence. Like I said, we're not the only solution out there. We work with partners that do great digital companions. There's great products out there that are digitized pill bottles. So it's really, I think it's in bringing the information together. And this, you talked about the intangibles. This is also good for the industry. Pharma always, or the last 10 or 20 years, had such a bad reputation. I think with the rapid response and research that went into COVID, I think that's going to help. Patients are now understanding company names. Everyone knows Moderna and Pfizer. They didn't know those very well a year ago. And this can help the pharma industry. It can help the relationship with physicians. So hopefully it's about relationship building to bring back pharma as a more credible, supportive industry and to build bridges with their physician, because now he or she is giving you a therapy and you kind of understand why you're on it and why you need to take it in a certain way. So it's trying to connect those lanes and bridges.
I like it. Eric, thoughts, closing comments when you think about this issue and the opportunity for biopharma and medtech?
Well, I think the call to action here, which Matthew and Abby really kind of described and really informed me here. I was madly taking notes. It's clear to me that life science companies need to have a personalized patient engagement and empowerment strategy that is really focused on being with patients every step of the way on their treatment journey. And as Matthew described, this is an area of emerging solutions and providers who can help companies, as long as they have a focus in that area, realize more of their brand's potential to help patients live healthier lives.
Well, thank you for that. Well, we know it's a $1.3 trillion industry. We talked about the $5 billion that's been spent on some of these programs, and we know that it's a $300 billion gap that we need to fill, and it really needs to be measured in patients and opportunity and better lives than necessarily dollars. So, really, in that framework, Abby, maybe you can kind of bring us home. What advice, what guidance would you give our life science executives as they're beginning to think about taking the next step when it comes to making sure that they're making the investments and demonstrating that commitment to both patient adherence, but also giving the empathy this constituency needs from their brand?
Sure. So, I think as Matthew just alluded to, I just think it's key that everyone continues to focus on those personalized solutions and, the fact that they do drive better engagement. It's not human or digital. It truly is both, in providing the pathway towards better patient outcomes. I mentioned we all need to come together collaboratively with that seat at the table, Frank, as you put it, to address the adherence barriers. with respect to empathy and tying it all together, I think if empathy isn't part of what anyone is not already incorporating into their programs, it should be. I think you're hearing and seeing more and more on a daily basis about empathy and how key and critical it is in addressing patients and speaking to patients and understanding patients, and the impact that it can have on driving behaviors. There is proof in that. And so I think, as pharma clients and companies look to kind of shift and migrate in that direction, I think, including empathy and whatever the outreach is incredibly important. And I think just remembering that, it isn't a one and done. There is no silver bullet, and that multi-touch, you've got to support the patient holistically, or as I like to say, surround sound patient engagement. And that certainly always includes empathy.
I love it. I love it. I think if empowerment and empathy are values for our brands, and I believe that they are, rather than something transactional or transient, but if they're values, then we're going to want to play the long game. And frankly, when it comes to these patients and their ability to have their lives improved and extended through our therapies, this is a long game worth playing. The stakes are really, really high, and the opportunity is enormous for brands that get it right, because it'll translate into so many other beneficial areas where more of our brands will be used. Physicians want to interact with our companies, but most importantly, patients win. And I think that's really important. So
Right.
On that note, Abby, Matthew, Eric, thank you for your time and treasures today. We got a lot out of our session. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us.
Really
All
appreciate
right.
it.
We'll see you in the next session, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.